Looking for magic cards? At flipsidegaming.com you can now use the promo code LVD to get a 10% discount on orders over $10 while supporting the channel at the same time. Hello and welcome to another episode of Wacky Wednesday, a weekly series where we explore wacky deck ideas in both standard and modern. And this week we're taking a look at a modern deck called Hunted Illness. It's a deck built around the hunted creatures from the original Ravnica block. We've got Hunted Phantasm as a 3 mana 4/6 unblockable, and Hunted Troll as a 4 mana 8/4 with Regenerate. But of course there's a small downside to these creatures, which is when the Hunted Phantasm enters the battlefield, the opponent gets 5 1/1 Goblin creature tokens, and when the Hunted Troll enters the battlefield, the opponent gets 4 1/1 blue fairy creature tokens with flying. So those are some real drawbacks, but to combat those drawbacks, we're also playing Illness in the ranks, a 1 mana enchantment that says creature tokens get -1/-1, which conveniently kills all the 1/1 tokens that you give with Hunted Phantasm and Hunted Troll, and then you're left with some pretty undercosted powerful creatures. And as if that weren't enough, we're also playing with Blood Artist, a 2 mana 0/1 creature that says whenever Blood Artist or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So if you happen to have a Blood Artist and an Illness in the ranks in play at the moment where you cast a Hunted Phantasm, our opponent gets 5 1/1 Goblin creature tokens which die right away to the Illness in the ranks, generating 5 different triggers from the Blood Artist, essentially gaining us 5 life and making the opponent lose 5 life for each Blood Artist that we have in play, so that's a pretty powerful combination. So that's the basic premise of the deck. Now let's take a look at the individual card choices. Over in the 1-drop slot we have 4 copies of Fatal Push as our removal spell of choice. Works great with all our fetch lands to enable Revolt. Then we also have 4 copies of Serum Visions to smooth out our draws, make sure we find the right combo pieces at the right time. And then of course our 4 copies of Illness in the ranks, which is kind of the centerpiece in the deck, and without it the deck doesn't really function all that well. Which is also why we're playing 4 copies of Commune with the Gods, which is a 2 mana sorcery that makes us reveal the top 5 cards of our library, and then we can put a creature or enchantment card from among those into our hand, and the rest goes into our graveyard. So this helps us find our copy of Illness in the ranks, and if we already have an Illness in the ranks, maybe we can find one of our hunted creatures or a Blood Artist. Then we also have a one-off copy of Engineered Explosives, kind of as a catch-all answer to problematic permanents from the opponent, but we can also just play it on 0 and then sacrifice it for 2 mana to destroy all tokens essentially, so that's a way for us to deal with our tokens that we might have given our opponent if we don't already have one of our enchantments in play. Then we also have 4 copies of Tarmogoyf, which works quite well as a 2 mana beatdown creature in a deck that's putting all these random card types in a graveyard. Besides creature, artifact, instant and land, which commonly end up in the graveyard, we also have Artifact with Engineered Explosives, we have Enchantment with Illness in the Ranks and Virulent Plague, and we even have a Planeswalker with Jace, Architect of Thought, so Tarmogoyf can get quite big in our deck. Then we have our 4 copies of Blood Artist, which is not really required for the deck to function, since just beating down with a hunted creature when we have an Illness in the ranks in play is sometimes enough, but it does add a lot of extra power to the deck when it is all functioning properly. We also have 2 copies of Virulent Plague, which for 3 mana gives all creature tokens -2/-2, so it's essentially a worse version of Illness in the ranks in our deck, since it's more expensive, but it's basically copies 5 and 6 of Illness in the ranks to add some additional consistency to the deck. And then we get to our hunted creatures, 4 copies of Hunted Phantasm, which is a 4/6 unblockable, drains the opponent for 5 when we have Blood Artist plus an enchantment in play. And then Hunted Troll, which is an 8/4, only drains the opponent for 4 if we have Blood Artist and Illness in the ranks. And then also a one-off spicy copy of Jace, Architect of Thought, which can function as a card advantage engine with this -2, but it can also keep opposing 1/1 tokens in check with this +1 ability, so if we don't have an Illness in the ranks or Virulent Plague, we can still maybe win a game with a Hunted Phantasm beating down, while Jace keeps all those goblins in check. Then another important part of the deck is one of its lands, Forbidden Orchard, which is a land that can tap for any color of mana, but it does give the opponent a 1/1 spirit token that doesn't have flying, it's just a colorless spirit token. But combine Forbidden Orchard with an Illness in the Ranks effect and a Blood Artist, and all of a sudden you have a land that taps for any color of mana that also drains the opponent for 1 whenever you tap it. So that's a pretty powerful effect, especially multiples if you have multiple Forbidden Orchards or multiple Blood Artists. so that adds another dimension to the deck. Of course, if you don't have an Illness in the Ranks type effect, you don't want to be tapping your Forbidden Orchard very often, since then you're giving the opponent free 1/1s, which of course is the drawback of the land in the first place. Then the rest of our mana base is pretty straightforward. We have 4 copies of Darkslick Shores as our fast land of choice, because blue and black are the most important colors early on if you look at our 1-drops. Then we have 1 of each Shock Land, Breeding Pool, Overgrown Tomb and Watery Grave, which we can fetch up with our fetch lands, as well as a total of 5 basic lands, 2 forests, 2 islands and a swamp, so we can technically still cast all our spells under a Blood Moon. And then a total of 8 fetch lands. We've got 4 Misties, 2 Polluted Delta and 2 Verdants. Then taking a quick look at our sideboard, we have some graveyard hate in the form of a Nihil Spellbomb and Grafdigger's Cage, also more artifacts for Tarmogoyf purposes. Then we have some counter spells, 2 copies of Ceremonious Rejection to counter colorless spells, and 2 copies of Stubborn Denial to counter any non-creature spells. Works very well with a large Tarmogoyf or one of our hunted creatures in play. Then we have Collective Brutality, mostly against burn decks. Can also side it in for the Duress type effect against more controlling decks or combo decks. We have Golgari Charm to destroy enchantments. Can also conveniently give all creatures -1/-1, so an additional way to deal with all the 1/1 tokens we might be giving our opponent. We've got an Abrupt Decay as an additional removal spell and kind of catch-all answer against enchantments or artifacts. And in a similar fashion, 2 copies of Maelstrom Pulse, which also deals with our tokens nicely, since we can just target 1 Goblin or Fairy token, and the Maelstrom Pulse will deal with all of them. And then also 1 copy of Phyrexian Arena, as kind of a grindy card advantage engine against more controlling or mid-range decks, and we can also find it with Commune with the Gods, because it is an enchantment. So that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the play, and this hand is interesting. We have Double Phantasm, Blood Artist, Orchard, but we're missing a way to get rid of the 1/1 tokens, and without it, this hand is a bit too risky. Don't have any card selection, and we're on the play, so don't get an extra draw step, so I think this is a mulligan, unfortunately. And this hand is not exciting, but we do just have Goyf plus Commune to fuel the Goyf, so I think this is a keep. And another Goyf, I suppose. This is kind of our plan, is to play a bunch of Goyfs and grow them with Commune. And then if we find some of our combo pieces, so be it, otherwise doesn't really matter. So given that we're not gonna fetch away the Goyf, don't see a reason to run out a fetch land, so we'll play the Shores and say go. Suppose we could have played a fetch land and not sacrificed it to hide some information. Probably gonna get a basic forest with the Verdant, although I guess we want double green, so yeah, this is fine. We can get basic forest with Verdant and then get a breeding pool with Misty Rainforest. Opponent with Mountain Go. So running out Tarmogoyf into a potential Lightning Bolt doesn't sound super appealing, so we could Commune first to grow the Tarmogoyf a bit. I think that makes sense. So let's get a basic forest. Commune. And try to grow these Goyfs. Alright, so Hunted, Troll, Hunted Phantasm and Illness in the Ranks. So by putting the Illness in the Ranks in the graveyard, we grow the Goyf by an additional point. And then we could just take the Hunted Phantasm, which is just fine as a beatdown creature. Yeah, I think that makes sense. So now we have access to 4/5 Tarmogoyfs. We don't really want to play out the Hunted Phantasm before beating down with Goyfs a bunch, since then the 1/1 tokens would be able to block the Tarmogoyf. But we'll see how things go here. Sulfur Falls into Thing in the Ice. Alright, so now we know what our opponent is up to. So I think the plan is just to run out a Goyf and then fetch a breeding pool end of turn. And blue-red is going to have a hard time answering Tarmogoyf. That's a 4/5. So we just have to hope that we get there before the Thing in the Ice transforms. I think the black card from the Hunted cycle is an actual horror, so that one wouldn't get bounced by the Thing in the Ice. But the ones we have access to are not horrors. Opponent with the Thought Scour, milling over Simian Spirit Guide and Thing in the Ice. Spirit Guide kind of indicates maybe a Through the Breach deck, so we have to watch out for that as well. Opponent could also be playing Blood Moons, although we didn't see any fetch land for basic island yet. So I think here we still get a breeding pool, and then with a Misty We can maybe get an island, does that make sense? Or do we just get an island here and then play out the Misty? Yeah, maybe it's just safer to get a basic island here and play around Blood Moon. Don't really need double green next turn and can always fetch for it with the second Misty. So I guess that makes sense. Alright, Illness in the Ranks is perfect, so now we get to go Phantasm into Illness in the Ranks, or the other way around. Let's attack for 5. Opponent also helping us out by casting the Thought Scour, putting an instant in the graveyard for Tarmogoyf. So our opponent could also be holding up a Remand, in which case just playing the Tarmogoyf twice is better than going Hunted Phantasm plus Illness in the Ranks. So we might actually want to play the Tarmogoyf here after all. So let's try it. And don't want to show the 4th land to our opponent yet. Alright, now we can run out the Illness in the Ranks. That resolves, run out the Misty, say go. Opponent with no instant end of turn, so the Thing in the Eye is still on 3 counters. Could be a Jace Mind Sculptor here perhaps, but with 2 Tarmogoyfs we can still pressure him. So unless our opponent through the breaches us, I think we're in okay shape. I think we'll leave the Misty uncracked for now, and the thinning effect is pretty marginal. So let's untap, find a Hunted Troll. I guess we attack for 10, and then second main we can run out one of our hunted creatures. Opponent does have a Lightning Bolt, maybe Double Bolt. Yep, Snapcaster Bolt, and all of a sudden Thing in the Eye is on 1 counter. And there it is. So will our opponent take 5? Nope, they're gonna chump with the Snapcaster Mage. So our opponent's probably gonna transform Thing in the Ice next turn, which makes it not super relevant to which creature we play here. I suppose we run out the Hunted Phantasm, since then if our opponent bounces our stuff and has a Blood Moon, we can still get a basic island and replay Phantasm plus Tarmogoyf. While if we want to play the Troll, we have to fetch a non-basic or a Forest. Hope that makes sense. So our opponent gets a bunch of Goblins that die right away, and we'll say go. Had we found a Fatal Push, that would have also been a nice answer to the Thing in the Ice. Faithless Looting is gonna transform it, and return our 2 creatures. Fatal Push would still kill the Awoken Horror here, since it still has a converted mana cost of 2. Used to be 0, but that changed a while ago, so that's also relevant for Engineered Explosives. A Lightning Bolt and Spirit Guide go to the graveyard. Opponent could flash back the looting as well. Opponent gets in for 7, and our opponent says go. So this is most likely to fetch a basic Forest, but I think we untap first. Alright, find a Forbidden Orchard. So now we can play Hunted Troll, keep up regeneration mana. This is worse against a Remand from our opponent, but our opponent didn't have the Remand a few turns ago when it seemed like a good place for them to play it. So I don't think our opponent has Remand unless they drew into it with looting, which is also a possibility. So I think we fetch a basic Forest here, and then run out the Hunted Troll. Opponent gets Fairies, which die right away, and then we play the Orchard, which means we have access to regeneration mana. So now we have a creature that can trade for the Horror from the opponent. So now we mainly need to worry about if our opponent has a Through the Breach. Manamorphose, and Illness in the Ranks is also pretty effective against Young Pyromancer, which our opponent could easily have in their deck. And the blue-red deck is going to have a hard time answering enchantments. Opponent does not attack, that's good. And Serum Visions a draw, so we can still Serum Visions, Goyf, and Phantasm. I guess then we don't keep up regeneration mana. I think we want to attack our opponent first, since we're fine just chumping with one of our creatures, if that means attacking for lethal next turn. So let's see if our opponent maybe flashes in a Snapcaster Mage to block with instead, or just takes the damage. And if our opponent just takes it, it's less important to keep up the regeneration. So let's Serum Visions first. Virulent Plague and 2 lands, which we can bottom. So let's run out Tarmogoyf first. See what happens. And then run out the Phantasm. And pass a turn. So now we have 2 creatures, so unless our opponent goes Cryptic Command, tap our team and then Lightning Bolt us, should be okay. Is this a Snapcaster Mage end of turn? It is, so that can bolt our face. So if they do have the Cryptic Command, we could be dead. Instead they go for a Thought Scour. So that's good news. So we haven't seen any indication of Through the Breach besides the Simian Spirit Guide, which to be fair is a pretty big indication. And now we also see Blood Moon and Remand go to the graveyard. So 2 cards I was talking about earlier. And alright, our opponent scoops it up, so we managed to beat Blue-Red Thing in the Ice. So how do we want to sideboard here? Stubborn Denial seems appealing. So is Brutality against the non-creature spells if they are on a Through the Breach deck. But Fatal Push is good against the Thing in the Ice, although we didn't need it there specifically, so perhaps it's not necessary. Cage can stop Snapcaster Mage, but I don't think it's necessary. Same with the Spellbomb. So I think we're mostly interested in Stubborn Denial. Could also see Phyrexian Arena being good. And Abrupt Decay Golgari Charm answer Blood Moon, but we can kind of fetch around it in a way. And we also have the Explosives as a potential answer. So I think we just go with 1 Collective Brutality to take an instant or sorcery. And then I don't want to change too much to the deck. I think this is fine. Could see keeping in more Fatal Pushes or more of these multicolor spells. But for now we'll try this. And then if our opponent switches to a Through the Breach plan or perhaps even a Platinum Imperium plan, we can adapt and bring in some other cards. Alright, last time the Tarmogoyf plan almost worked, and this time we even have an Engineered Explosives to go with it, so I think this is a keep. So this wants to get an Overgrown Tomb. Can't fetch a basic forest unfortunately, and a Hunted Phantasm as well, so let's run out Polluted Delta, say go. And once again we're faced with the question of whether we want to Commune or run out Tarmogoyf right away. Our opponent fetched the Steam Vents right away, so it could be that they sideboarded out the Blood Moon, which makes sense since we fetched a lot of basics last game. Opponent with a Looting, discarding Looting and land, and a Sulphur Falls. Alright, so I'm not gonna respect Blood Moon this game, so let's fetch an Overgrown Tomb, I think. Could also go for Breeding Pool, but then we don't have access to black mana, so I think we go with Overgrown Tomb here. And right now Tarmogoyf is a 2-3, and if our opponent tries to Lightning Bolt it, it would be a 3-4, so it would survive the Lightning Bolt. So let's run him out. Say go. So that slight pause from the opponent could mean that they have a Lightning Bolt in hand, and they do also have the Thing in the Ice once again, but we have the Explosives to potentially deal with it, although it would also kill our own Tarmogoyfs. So the Thing in the Ice just blocks the Tarmogoyf here as well. Kind of want a Serum Visions to find lands, and then we can also run out the Illness in the Ranks, but that wouldn't grow the Tarmogoyf, while playing out the Commune with the Gods would. So here I think it's between Serum Visions and Commune. I think we want a Serum Visions just to smooth out our draw. And alright, we can definitely keep the Darkslick Shores on top. And then the question is, do we want the Blood Artist? Might be too slow at this point since we only have the Hunted Phantasm to go with it. So let's top the Shores and bottom the Artist. And then we can just run out Illness in the Ranks and say go. Suppose we could have started the turn by attacking with Tarmogoyf in case our opponent respects some sort of combination of instants that would grow the Tarmogoyf. So perhaps missed out on 2 points of damage here. Alright, so now we can go Darkslick Shores into Hunted Phantasm. Opponent could respond with a Remand or some other counterspell. Then a creature would be in the graveyard as well as an instant, so then we could attack with the Tarmogoyf, so I think that's a fine exchange. And yep, there's a mana leak. So we will be able to attack for 4 with Tarmogoyf. We'll say go. Our opponent's also stuck on 2 lands here. Let's see if that changes. They did cast a Faithless Looting, and I think discarded an island, so perhaps got a bit greedy. So we can't play 2 Tarmogoyfs because we don't have double green here, but I think playing 1 Tarmogoyf is still better than anything else we can do. So let's start by attacking for 4. Opponent with double bolt, it looks like. Yep. So Thing in the Ice with 1 counter. So I guess this is a good time to run out the Engineered Explosives on 2, so that would cost us 2 life, which I guess is fine if we want to blow it up. Say go. Opponent just says go, and in the end step we can sacrifice the Engineered Explosives so that we can deploy our Tarmogoyfs. Alright, Blood Artist as well. Let's lead with Blood Artists. And then run out Tarmogoyf. So now we have a nice big Tarmogoyf and a Blood Artist. Opponent's still stuck on 2 lands. Alright, our opponent just scoops it up, unable to find the 3rd land, and perhaps a hand that was not able to answer Tarmogoyf in time. And there we go, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, and this hand seems fine. All we need is one of our hunted creatures. We already have our enchantments and Blood Artist, even with a Forbidden Orchard, so we'll keep. Opponent with basic island into Aether Vial, so we could be up against a Merfolk deck, so don't want to run out this island unless we have to. And Tarmogoyf is a pretty good draw here as well. So I think we just go Darkslick Shores into Illness in the Ranks. Say go. So this game's going to be a race between the Merfolk and our hunted creatures, hopefully. Picked up a swamp, so here we could fetch for a basic forest and run out Tarmogoyf, and the next turn we can go Blood Artist, run out Orchard, start draining our opponent with that. So yeah, let's fetch a basic forest to grow the Tarmogoyf by 1. So let's get a forest, run out the Goyf. And Illness in the Ranks could be useful against our opponents if they're running Master of Waves, since all those elemental tokens would die instantly. Always nice when your Illness in the Ranks does something outside of your combo. Another Aether Vial. And yeah, I think it makes sense to keep the Forbidden Orchard in hand as long as possible to play around Spreading Seas, since we don't want our opponents playing a Spreading Seas on our Orchard, since it's pretty valuable with Blood Artist. Opponent attacks for 2, we'll take it. They don't vial in any creatures here. And a Curse Catcher, not super relevant since we don't have a ton of instants and sorceries that are expensive. A second Illness in the Ranks, so can't really afford to attack here with our Tarmogoyf. So instead we are forced to play Blood Artists. And I think we just say go, don't see a reason to run out a second Illness in the Ranks right now. Another Master of the Pearl Trident. Opponent now has a bunch of 3/3 island walking creatures, so we really want to find one of our hunted creatures to put something big into play to block with, and drain our opponent for a bunch. Since we're already down to 11, end of turn we can drain our opponent for 1, so we get to gain some life back. Don't use our mana. Fatal Push, that's a good draw, so that can take out a Master of the Pearl Trident, put something in the graveyard for Tarmogoyf, so I think we are better off keeping that up. And we can definitely pay for the Curse Catcher, and then maybe we can ambush something with the Tarmogoyf. Definitely don't want to play out our island here if we can help it. Our opponent putting Aether Vial up to 4, maybe indicating that Master of Waves is incoming. And then before damage we can Fatal Push the other Master, putting an instant and a creature in the graveyard. And our opponent doesn't have a Vial on 3, so they can't Vial in Akira or Kopala. Opponent has a Vial in response for a Master of Waves perhaps, but Illness in the Ranks is going to have a word. And our opponent probably should have waited until after a Fatal Push, since now our opponent gets more tokens with Devotion, and we get to drain our opponent more with Blood Artist. So that's one of the advantages of playing unusual decks, is that your opponents might make some mistakes, since some of those cards are pretty unusual. And right, our opponent scoops it up, so we get to go straight to sideboarding against Merfolk. So that was pretty unexpected and entertaining, hopefully. So how do we want to sideboard against Merfolk? Essentially want to bring in all the removal we have available. So Collective Brutality, even though it's not exciting as -2/-2 for 2 mana, is probably still worth it. Same with Maelstrom Pulse. Golgari Charm is a bit narrower, since giving -1/-1 doesn't do a whole lot unless they have a bunch of 2/1s and 1/1s in play. Abrupt Decay is excellent. That's about it, so 6 removal spells we want to bring in. Engineered Explosives, by the way, is also excellent against Merfolk, so I could see shaving some of our Hunted package, just because it might be too slow against Merfolk and they might mess up our mana as well. So I think Hunted Troll can probably go, and Virulent Plague can go as well. Yeah, I think this configuration is probably fine. Commune with the Gods might be more likely to miss now that we took out 4 of our creatures and 2 of our enchantments, but this is probably still fine. And this hand unfortunately doesn't have any lands in it, so that's an easy mulligan. Alright, this is a bit better. We are on the draw, so we get an extra draw step plus a scry to look for a green source, And we have Shores plus Fatal Push, so that's nice. And Polluted Delta is perfect, so we'll keep that on top. So let's see if our opponent can come back from this mulligan. Mutavault, nice promo art into Ether Vial. So they're down to 2 cards in hand here. And I think we just run out the Illness in the Ranks right now. Could have decided to keep up Fatal Push. Maybe if our opponent finds a land and attacks us with Mutavault, but also want to deploy the Illness at some point. Cavern of Souls, naming Merfolk. And our opponent is indeed attacking with Mutavault, so maybe keeping up Fatal Push would have paid off. But maybe in that case our opponent wouldn't have attacked with Mutavault, so let's untap. And Maelstrom Pulse can maybe blow up the Ether Vial at some point, although that's not a priority. So we would just want to get a green source here, forced to take a dual land, and we don't want to get an island, so I guess that leaves us with Overgrown Tomb. Run out Goyf, and say go. And now we just want to try to trade these removal spells for our opponent's creatures as much as possible, while beating down with the Tarmogoyf. Opponent with plenty of mana, but perhaps light on Merfolk. They could still attack us for 2 with the Mutavault here, which is what they do. So we'll take it, we're down to 13. Can always gain some life back with the Brutality if we have to. Opponent's got a Lord, it looks like. Master of the Pearl Trident, so we take 3, down to 12. Untap, find another Goyf. So opponent could have interaction, but they only have 1 card left, so that's unlikely. So I think we just Brutality, killing the Master of the Pearl Trident, and attack with a pretty big Tarmogoyf. And I don't think we need to drain our opponent, since we've got the Mutavault covered with Fatal Push, and then we have plenty of Goyfs to close out the game with. So let's give this -2/-2. And now their opponent can't vial in another Lord. It's nice to be able to fire off that Brutality. Get in for 3. Say go. Opponent puts a vial up to 3. And they've got an Oboro as well. Mutavault keeps getting in there. Can definitely see a world where not draining with the Brutality comes back to bite us here, as our opponent vials in a Regery, so we get hit for 3 down to 9. And another Brutality, and now our opponent's empty-handed, so we know for sure this is gonna resolve. So now perhaps we wanna use a drain mode just to get out of range of any possible shenanigans. And I think we just discard our Maelstrom Pulse here. Keep the Fatal Push and the 2 Goyfs, and attack for 3. Could also keep the Goyf on defense, but I think we're winning this race. Vial up to 4. And Spreading Seas on the Darkslick Shores. Actually, had our opponent done this on the Overgrown Tomb, we could have been in a bit of trouble, since then we would have been unable to cast more Tarmogoyfs. And a Relic of Progenitus, wow, that's a nice sequence of draws there for the opponent. So now all of a sudden our Tarmogoyf plan looks a lot worse. But we do have some backup Fatal Pushes, so let's attack, see what our opponent does. If they just sacrifice the Relic right away. They do. So Tarmogoyf doesn't deal any damage. So now, do we run out another Tarmogoyf? I think we do. Opponent does get to attack us with Mutavault, but then we'll be able to maybe Fatal Push one of the opponent's creatures and start beating down again with Tarmogoyfs. And there's a Curse Catcher, not too relevant here since we can pay for it. And a Marrow Regery as well. Alright, so opponent with a nice sequence of draws here. And Breeding Pool is not a bad draw, since now we can Fatal Push plus run out another Tarmogoyf. So I think we just attack with both and then Fatal Push the Curse Catcher since we don't have Revolt. I doubt our opponent will block here since we're attacking with 0/1s. Alright, let's Fatal Push the Curse Catcher. And all of a sudden deal 4 damage. And I think it's worth it to run out another Goyf here at the cost of 2 life, since that's also a blocker potentially for the Regery. Opponent can hit us for 3 with the Mutavault, but that's about it. Then we can hit them for 6 down to 2. And then if they activate Mutavault again, we can Fatal Push it. And yep, our opponent scoops it up. Alright, we managed to beat Merfolk. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the play. And this hand seems quite good. We've got Blood Artists plus Illness in the Ranks with Forbidden Orchard. And a Hunted creature, just needs some lands to get to it. And Serum Visions can help there as well. Opponent leads with a Gemstone Caverns. Alright, so they might be on the colorless Eldrazi deck. That's all the rage lately. Let's see what they exile. They exiled an Opt, alright, never mind, so not the Eldrazi deck. Alright, so what do we do turn 1? We can run out Illness in the Ranks, we can Serum Visions. I think we just Serum Visions, try to hit our land drops. Alright, we found another Serum Visions and another Blood Artist. So Blood Artist is nice with this Forbidden Orchard, but we already have one. So I think we just want to find lands. So let's bottom both. And then next turn we can go Serum Visions plus Illness in the Ranks, which is also a pretty efficient turn. Opponent with an Opt. There's Jace, so another reason to want to hit land drops here. So let's Serum Visions. Alright, there's a Forest, and we drew another Fatal Push, which is probably not great here. Tarmogoyf is interesting, but we really just want to get up to 4 mana. So let's bottom the Goyf and top the Forest. And then run out Illness in the Ranks. After giving the opponent a Spirit token very briefly. Not sure what our opponent is onto. A blue deck with Gemstone Caverns. Perhaps a Taking Turns deck of some sort. And we also don't get to drain the opponent since the Spirit dies before the Blood Artist comes into play. But that's fine. There could be situations where you want to play the Blood Artist before the Illness in the Ranks just to be able to drain the opponent for a bunch. But then you don't get to have the dream curve of turn 1 Illness in the Ranks, turn 2 Blood Artist, and turn 3 Phantasm. Opponent finally fetches up some basics. And Snapcaster Opt end of turn. So if we can find any land next turn, we can run out the Hunted Troll. A tapped Tolaria West. So that could indicate some blue deck with Asphodel, there it is. And Ancestral Vision perhaps. So that's scary. Opponent does not attack with Snapcaster Mage, that's interesting. And there's Misty Rainforest, perfect. Probably doesn't matter too much here which land we get. So let's get the Overgrown Tomb, run out the Hunted Troll, drain our opponent for a total of 5 with the Forbidden Orchard. Target our opponents. Alright, so our opponent's at 13, but they do have their Asphodel in play, which could do very scary things. Next turn we can maybe play a Jace, get some card advantage going. Is this a Time Warp? Yep, alright, so our opponent is indeed on a Taking Turns deck. So we might not get to untap here, which would be pretty sad, but that's the nature of the beast. Opponent with the free Serum Visions off of Asphodel. So the opponent's going to try and chain a bunch of these Time Warp effects to essentially take as many turns as they need to win the game. At least they don't get to attack us with Snapcaster Mage every turn. Let's see if they found another Time Warp effect. They only have 3 cards in hand. Snapcaster Mage that they get to cast for free with Asphodel targets Time Warp. So that's pretty neat. Opponent gets to take an extra turn. And there's Snapcaster Mage targeting Serum Visions this time. So opponent might be out of Time Warp effects, but they do have 3 Snapcasters in play in the meantime. Nope, never mind, there's another Time Warp. And Temporal Mastery revealed. So opponent gets to Miracle a Temporal Mastery to take an additional turn. Still no attacks from the Snapcaster Mages. Our opponent needs a draw spell here to keep hitting these Time Warp effects. Another Asphodel, this is probably not what they wanted here. And Exhaustion doesn't let us untap, so it's essentially like a Time Warp, but at least we get to draw a card here. Run out Watery Grave untapped. We could attack with Hunted Troll, but then we don't get to keep up Regeneration and our opponent can just triple block, so that seems like a bad idea. So let's just pass. Opponent's empty-handed, so hopefully they don't draw into an Ancestral Vision and keep going off. Just a land for the turn. Alright, so we can finally start attacking with the Hunted Troll. End of turn we'll Fatal Push a Snapcaster, drain the opponent for 1 with Blood Artist. Untap. And another Hunted Troll is gonna close the game out pretty quickly. So let's attack for 8. Opponent's just gonna chum block. Drain our opponent for 1. and run out another Hunted Troll second main. And they're dead next turn if they don't draw anything. So let's see. Another exhaustion. That's fine. So we can just Fatal Push the Snapcaster Mage and then they're dead. I guess the technically correct moment to do this is in our turn, so that our Forbidden Orchard untaps, but we know our opponent's dead, so it doesn't matter. Alright, sweet. Get to go to sideboarding against mono blue taking turns of sorts. They also had some white in there. Want our anti-combo cards, Collective Brutality, and Golgari Charm can also blow up the As Foretold, same with Abrupt Decay and Maelstrom Pulse, and Fatal Push does not look great. And then Phyrexian Arena also looks pretty good as a way to draw extra cards, and of course Stubborn Denial is probably our best sideboard card here. So lots of cards we want to bring in. Engineered Explosives, while dealing with As Foretold, is a bit slow, and most of our other cards also deal with our tokens, so I could see taking out the explosives. Jace is probably a bit too slow here, and I could see shaving some Virulent Plagues, and at that point we also want to shave some Communes, since we have fewer creatures we can hit, and fewer enchantments, I mean. This looks fine. So we're a bit less likely here to find our enchantments, so we have to keep that in mind. So having one in our opening hand is extra valuable. This opening hand has a Serum Visions and a Tarmogoyf to get us started, and 2 Hunted Trolls. So it's not a great draw by any means, but it's probably better than going to 6. So we'll keep. Opponent leads with Serum Visions. Opponent goes top with Serum Visions, so that's not good for us. So we're just gonna do the same. Serum Visions, look for one of our enchantments. I guess now it's only Illness in the ranks. Or just look for general answers to As Foretold. A green source would also be nice, so we can play Tarmogoyf without needing to tap the Forbidden Orchard. Alright, there's Abrupt Decay, there's Commune, and there's Misty, so all cards we're interested in. So we do want to keep the Misty, but if we shuffle, then we lose the Commune with the Gods, which we kind of want for Tarmogoyf, and just to find our Illness in the ranks. So I think we top both. And then maybe next turn we are forced to play the Forbidden Orchard for green mana for Tarmogoyf. There's a Glacial Fortress. And a Search for Azcanta. Alright, so Abrupt Decay can deal with that at some points. Probably don't need to Abrupt Decay right away, even though our opponent does get some value from the search. I would rather develop the Tarmogoyf first, just to get a creature to beat down with, and then at some point we can deal with the search and grow the Tarmogoyf significantly. So it's actually interesting whether or not we want to run out the Forbidden Orchard here. Maybe we're fine just fetching away the Commune with the Gods, since we are already going to put instant land and enchantment in the graveyard. So yeah, that's probably fine. So here I think we want to fetch a Breeding Pool. Take 2, run out Tarmogoyf. Say go. So we are diminishing our chances of finding an Illness in the ranks, but with 2 Tarmogoyfs we might not need to find it. And there's a Collective Brutality, which could also be very nice. Think we just attack for 2 and play another Tarmogoyf, and then next turn we can go Abrupt Decay plus Brutality. Think that makes sense, so let's attack first. I guess an Exhaustion would be annoying. So let's run out Tarmogoyf number 2, say go. And our opponents kept all their cards with Azcanta so far. There's a Jace going to the graveyard, so they might already have a copy, but with 2 Tarmogoyfs we can pressure a Jace pretty efficiently. Yep, there's a Jace. Opponent's gonna Brainstorm, so 4 mana Brainstorm from the opponent, and in our turn we get to Brutality plus Abrupt Decay, and take out the Jace as well. Another Forbidden Orchard, not exactly what we want here. So I think we start by casting the Brutality, targeting our opponent. Could also drain our opponent, discarding an Orchard or a Hunted Troll, since we probably don't need them. So I guess that makes sense. And I think we'll discard a Troll to grow the Tarmogoyfs more. And our opponent's hand is Ancestral Vision, Opt, Temporal Mastery. So they probably put the Ancestral Vision there with their Brainstorm, Interesting to see Temporal Mastery still there after Jace Brainstorm. Could be that they have another one on top that they can miracle. The most pressing card is Opt, since Ancestral Vision and Mastery are pretty slow, but could be that they have an Asphodel on top. So I think we're probably better off taking the Ancestral Vision here, and then let them keep the Opt. And then we want to attack first. Oof, I made a mistake here. So the play I should have made is play the Forbidden Orchard, attack Jace with one Goyf and our opponent with another Goyf, and then before damage Abrupt Decay the Surge to grow the Tarmogoyf by 1. So this way we missed out on 1 damage essentially. We'll have to live with that. Now we can play the Orchard, and I think we just Abrupt Decay right now. Don't see a reason to let our opponent keep the Surge. Perhaps they kept a card on top that they wanted to put in their graveyard with their Ascanta. I guess we even missed out on 2 points of damage since there wasn't an instant in the graveyard yet. So our opponent should be at 9 here, and unsurprisingly our opponent kept a Temporal Mastery on top after brainstorming with Jace. So they do get an extra turn here, and opponent casts Opt. So they still have Temporal Mastery in hand and 1 unknown card. They get to take an extra turn. They might as well attack us for 1. Opponent with another Opt. And is this another Jace? Nope, Cryptic Command to tap our creatures and draw a card, but I guess our opponent wanted to bounce our Tarmogoyf, but misclicked and then conceded because they misclicked. That's unfortunate. So would have liked to see how this game ended, since our opponent certainly wasn't out of it yet. Alright, let's see what our draw steps were looking like. Watery Grave, Darkslick, Illness. Alright, so we would have found an Illness in the ranks eventually, which would have unlocked the Hunted Troll as an additional play, but it would have taken us a few turns, so our opponent could have certainly still won this game. Well, anyways, I want to thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this gameplay, and as always, have a nice day. I also want to thank all my patrons for supporting the channel, and you can do so yourself as well over at patreon.com/LegenVD, where you get cool rewards for supporting the channel, as well as getting us closer to our goals, where with every goal reached, we will release an additional weekly series. So if you want to see more content, Patreon is the place to go.